$3 million, I said, sliding the canceled check across the table. That's what racism cost you today, and the room of executives stopped pretending they weren't sweating. You could hear the soft whine of the HVAC and the little squeak their leather chairs made when they shifted. And for a second, I almost laughed because 24 hours earlier, I was the woman in handcuffs being walked through the busiest terminal in Atlanta like a cautionary tale. Yeah, that happened. And that Tuesday started like any other high-stakes travel day. Heels clicking, carry-on rolling, brain already in San Francisco for a keynote and a meeting that could fund our clinical trials. I had seat 2A booked months ago because I work in the air, spread out slides, notes, data. I need the window light and the little bubble of quiet you get up front. You know what I mean. The gate agent recognized me. The lead flight attendant said his uncle's therapy came from our company. I thanked him, boarded, and then I saw her. A blonde flight attendant with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The kind of look black folks clock in a half-second and file away under we'll see. I was in 2A with my briefcase open when a man in a perfect suit stopped by my shoulder and said, "Excuse me." "That's my seat." He didn't ask, he announced, showed me a boarding pass like a badge. Thomas Harrington, CEO voice, familiar with being obeyed. I lifted my pass. Same seat. Easy fix, right? Except the blonde attendant, Karen, took his pass like it was a relic and glanced at mine like it was a coupon. "Computer's down," she said. "Mr. Harrington is one of our most valued customers." The subtext wasn't even sub. And suddenly other phones in first class were angled just so, because people know when a story is about to start. They called a supervisor who confirmed what the app already told me. Double assignment. System error. Then asked if I would move to 3C to help us stay on schedule. I'd arrived first. I was working. The question was why his convenience trumped mine by default. Silence. A tight smile. "We'd just like to keep this easy." "Easier for whom?" I asked. The captain came out, greeted Thomas by first name, shook his hand like they were at a club, then looked at me like the problem. "Ma'am, we need to depart on time." And when I repeated the facts, same seat, system error, no misbehavior, he nodded to Karen who made a call. 2 security officers boarded. One clamped down on my wrist before finishing the sentence about comply. Metal bit skin, breath caught. And I said, "Please do not touch me. I have done nothing wrong." They tightened anyway. That walk down the aisle. You feel it in your bones. The righteous whispers, the ugly mutters, the phones, the heat of humiliation washing up your neck. I said my name clearly. "I'm the CEO of Horizon Biotech." Someone laughed like that's what they all say. In the security room, a supervisor with starched sleeves and wrinkled empathy flipped my ID like a dealer board with his own cards. He told me Cruz felt threatened. I told him to verify anything. Our site, the manifest, a phone call, and he said all in good time, which is bureaucrat for never, and my wrist throbbed. And the clock on Tokyo time in my head kept moving. Then the twist, the door opened, and Officer Samuel Green came in, looked at me, looked at the file, and said, "That's enough." He unlocked the cuffs, apologized, verified me in 5 minutes flat. The contrast stung like peroxide. The exact same system can be brutal or humane depending on the human running it. The airline's customer relations director rushed in next. Words like platinum and valued spilling out of her as if those were the qualifiers that would have saved me on the jet bridge. I asked for my phone, called my COO, moved meetings, and said 6 words that changed the room's oxygen level. The partnership is on hold. And while we were still in that fluorescent box, videos of my removal were already climbing the feed. Hashtags stacking up. The public doing what the public does when a clear picture tells an old story new. You know what I mean. And I thought about my father telling 12-year-old me, "You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far." And about how tired I am of being extraordinary just to be treated ordinary. We set up in the 4 Seasons like a war room. Legal, comms, ops, the whole crew. Documented the bruises, compiled the clips. Mapped a strategy that wasn't about a bigger check. It was about a bigger change. The airline pushed a statement with those corporate verbs: regret, investigating. Protocols. While their stock dipped and my inbox flooded with people who had the same story but not the same platform, the second twist arrived quietly. A DM from a flight attendant named Aisha who'd watched me get cuffed and had been filing ignored complaints about similar incidents for a year and a half. Her paper trail plus public records plus a few brave employees painted a pattern the airline couldn't PR their way around. Next morning, we took the elevator to the 30th floor, glass walls, panoramic views, and three executives who looked like they'd slept at the office. They slid an apology and a compensation package across the table. I didn't touch it. Instead, I played the composite video angles and then laid out our terms: mandatory anti-bias training with outside instructors, independent review board with teeth, transparent quarterly reporting, revised removal protocols that made security the last resort, not the first reflex, and executive compensation tied to measurable progress. They called it extensive. I called it a starting point. They asked for discretion. I gave them a deadline. 3 o'clock. My statement goes live. Include your commitments or your silence, your choice. Here's where something I didn't plan happened. The CEO, Bill Parker, called later and asked to meet off the record. Said the hardest conversation he'd had wasn't with the board or investors. It was with his daughter, who asked how he could run a company where this could happen. I don't hand out gold stars for basic awareness. But I know the difference between posturing and a man who just discovered a blind spot he can't unsee. Understanding is an action, I told him. He nodded. And then he slid back a document with every reform signed and dated and timelines tighter than mine. Karen and the captain on leave pending investigation, 22,000 employees in training, quarterly public dashboards, whistleblower protections, bonuses that now depended on culture, not just costs. When accountability comes with metrics, you can work with that. The press conference outside their tower wasn't triumphant. It was measured. This isn't a one-off. It's a system that keeps choosing the easy story over the true one. And the dam broke. Competitors advertised their training. Congress called for hearings. The security contractor changed policy so officers verify before they escalate. And then Thomas, the man from 2A, asked to see me. I didn't want the optics of a redemption arc. But I also believe people can learn. He said he'd never noticed how the world greased the rails for him. He was embarrassed by his behavior. He put his own company through training using that flight as the case study. An unlikely ally is still an ally if the work gets done. A month later, we stood in the airline's atrium launching reforms that were real, not decorative. Aisha promoted to help design training that treats every passenger like a person, Officer Green advising on de-escalation and assessment. A reporting pipeline that can't be quietly buried. And yes, I agreed to serve as a special advisor because walking away would have felt righteous but changed less. Sometimes the harder thing is to stand inside the machine and keep your boot wedged in the door so it can't swing shut on the next person. I flew them again, deliberately, 3 months out. Slid into a seat by the window and felt the difference. Small things, big things. The way the attendant greeted every row the same. The way a question became a conversation instead of a command. I rested my wrist on the armrest and thought about how the marks had faded but the memory hadn't, and how grief and anger can calcify into something heavy you carry or be ground down into grit you pour into a foundation. Your call. People asked if I took the money. Here's the truth. The $3 million went from PR gloss to seed money for training, audit, protection for whistleblowers, and a scholarship for kids who will build the next horizon and won't have to perform excellence to be granted basic dignity. That line I gave them. What racism cost you today wasn't a zinger. It was a receipt, but the real bill comes due when culture doesn't change. When the next Jasmine gets walked down another aisle while everyone looks away and says they're just following protocol. The last twist came as a letter from Karen after her training, not defensive, not performative, just a human being saying I saw what I didn't want to see in myself, and I'm doing the work. I met her, we talked about reflexes and stories we're taught to believe. And I realized the win wasn't her apology or my vindication. It was the chance to convert shame into practice so this job gets easier for the next crew member who has to make a faster, fairer call at 7:06 a.m. with a cabin full of opinions and a departure slot ticking down. So here's the cinematic frame I'll leave you with. Late afternoon light slanting through a jet bridge window. A line of travelers, equal parts hope and hurry. A captain holding the door while a young attendant checks a manifest without assumptions. And somewhere behind them a woman touches the place on her wrist where a lesson once bit hard and then lets her hand fall away because she's not bracing anymore. She's boarding. Did we build a system that catches people before they fall, or one that waits to film them on the way down. If this makes you think about the choice between an apology and accountability, between moving on and making change, tell me where you land and why. Share your own line-in-the-sand moment in the comments. Argue with the parts that push you, agree with the parts that ring true. And if you believe stories like this help nudge big systems toward better, tap like, subscribe, send this to someone who still thinks bias is a PR issue instead of a people issue. Your voice matters more than you think, and the next time someone tells you to keep it easy, remember, easy for whom?